Good morning, class. This morning we are going to discuss Chapter 3. Chapter 3 deals with the different types of obligations. If you look into the starting, the beginning of Chapter 3, nahahati ang classification into primary classification and secondary classification. I would like to emphasize the primary classification of obligation kasi ito yung madalas nating gamitin and maybe some point of the tawag nito secondary classifications of obligation. There are technically 10 primary classifications of obligation. This you have to remember. The first is pure obligation that is defined under Article 1179. Now, Article 1179. First paragraph defines what is a pure obligation and the second paragraph defines what is a conditional obligation. The first is the pure obligation. You say that the obligation is pure if it is not subject to any condition. By the way, what is a condition? A condition is a future and uncertain event or a past event unknown to parties. Therefore, if it is a pure obligation, it's demandable at once. Like let us say, I will give you this pen, period. That is a pure obligation because that is not subject to any condition. But if my giving you this pen is subject to a condition, then that is a conditional obligation. There are two types of conditions, class. You have first the suspensive condition and second you have the resolutory condition. Suspensive condition gives rise to an obligation. Like let us say, I will give you this pen when you graduate from college. So upon graduation from college, what right do you have to demand the delivery of the pen? That is suspensive condition. The other one is resolutory condition. It puts an end to an obligation. Like let us say, I will give you this pen. You may use this pen until you graduate from college. Pag nakagraduate ka ng college, what is your obligation? To return the pen to me. That if kung may ink pa. So, first classification is first type of obligation. Primary type of obligation is pure obligation. Second, you have the conditional obligation. Third type, that is the obligation with a period. What is a period? A period is a future and certain event. Unlike condition, wherein the condition may be a future and uncertain event or a past event unknown to parties, condition, a period is a future and certain event. The one that it will certainly happen ba? Like let us say, I will give you this pen when you graduate from college. Condition or period? Depende kung nag-aral ka, di period yan. Pero kung di ka nag-aral, then that is a condition. Anyway, things which are certain, like let's say the death of your dog. No dog lives forever. Therefore, if I say that I will give you this pen when your dog dies, that is a period because no dog lives forever, diba? But when I say I will give you this pen when you get married, that is a condition because you may choose, you may choose single blessedness, or you will marry your career and the like, So that is a condition. So again, a period is a future and future and certain event. So that is the third type yan siya, obligation with a period. Then let us go to the fourth type. The fourth type is alternative obligation. What is an alternative obligation? Several objects are agreed, but the delivery of one completes the obligation, or perfects the obligation. I will deliver to you this plate or this mug or this saucer. Tatlo ang object mo. Take note of the or. So, ibig sabihin, if I deliver to you the mug, that settles the obligation or the plate or the saucer. So, that is alternative obligation. Then you have number 5, you have facultative obligation. What is a facultative obligation? The one that only one prestation or one object is agreed, but there is a substitute. You can always substitute. Like let's say, I promise to deliver to you this saucer. Nabasag man ang saucer. Ang substitute niya is cup. So, instead of saucer, it's cup ang i-deliver mo. But of course, ang choice, depende yan siya, pag-uusapan natin yan siya in the future. you call that one facultative obligation. Okay, so you have alternative obligation, several objects are agreed. Then you have the facultative obligation, wherein only one prestation or one object is agreed, but you may substitute it with another. So that is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is the fifth. No? Let us go to the sixth obligation. That is the joint obligation. Joint obligation, if there are as many creditors as there are debtors. No? Like let us say, A and B umutang kay C and D 10,000. Magkakano ang pwedeng singilin? How much may C collect from A? 2 debtors, 2 creditors, 4. No, 2 plus 2 equals 4 divided by 10, that is 2,500. Therefore, ang pwede lang masingil ni C kay A is 2,500. Hindi niya pwedeng masingil ang 5,000. Why? Because the other 2,500 is the obligation of B to him. Na? Okay, as many creditors as there are debtors. The issue is different if it is a solidary obligation. In solidary obligation, hindi siya as many creditors as there are debtors. No? So, the liability of one is the liability of all. Like let us say, A, B, and C nangutang kay D ng 10,000. Magkakano ang pwedeng masingil ni D kay A? Ang pwede niyang masingil kay A is 10,000. Na? The entire obligation, because the payment of the solidary debtor erases or completes the obligation or perfects the obligation or terminates the obligation. But of course, anong mangyayari kay B and C? Of course, meron siyang reimbursement. A is entitled to reimbursement from B and C. So yan ang joint at saka solidary obligation. Then you have the divisible obligation and the indivisible obligation. We are talking here of the object. No? If the obligation is capable of partial performance, then that is a divisible obligation. But if it is not capable of partial performance, then that is a indivisible obligation. Then you have the obligation with a penal clause. The obligation wherein upon inception, pinag-usapan na ninyo ang penalty in case of delay. Oftentimes, it's liquidated damages. No? So these are the 10 primary kinds of obligation. Sa secondary types, marami yan siya class, no? Basahin nyo lang. But I would like to emphasize the difference between a civil obligation, a natural obligation, and a moral obligation. You say that the obligation is civil, no? If there is this juridical necessity. Ibig sabihin, it is demandable. If you cannot deliver, there is a corresponding penalty. No? Damages would ensue. Like let us say, it is the obligation of the employer to pay the minimum wage to its employee. So that is a civil obligation. But once the employee resigns, tapos underpaid pala siya, no? The employee is given 3 years under the labor code to demand the payment of back wages. Okay, kasi paglampas ng 3 years class, prescription sets in. Na? Prescription sets in. Prescription meaning that your right, you can no longer enforce because you slept on your right. Mura na siya glatches po ba? We will discuss that in some other, in higher law subject, no? Glatches. So, after 3 years, hindi na makukolect ng employee yung back wages niya, no? That is converted into a natural obligation. So natural obligations are formerly civil obligation. So depende na yan dun sa employer kung bayaran niya or hindi beyond 3 years. Then you have moral obligation. Moral obligation is not demandable at all, no? Like let us say, in times of your suffering, I went there, no? I consoled you, no? In times of my suffering, are you obligated to console me? No. Pero konsensya na lang yan. Okay? So, these are the different types of obligation covered by Chapter 3. As to the nitty-gritty, you look into you read your book, you study your book, nandun yung mga discussion niya, whatever issues, no, whatever issues or whatever gray areas na medyo kailangan ng verification, you raise that in our consultative discussion. You read also the lecture notes, class, ha? Okay, have a good day.